up, gamers? Today on Dice and Dragons, as you can see, there's no board game in front of me because we are trying something new today. I'm going to be reviewing Realms of Terrinoth, the fantasy campaign setting for Fantasy Flight Games Genesys RPG system. Now, before we get into a little bit more about what the video will be about, I want to highlight that I am not reviewing the Genesys system. My game group currently only plays 5th edition. We have discussed potentially moving into Genesys, either to take a break, do a one-shot, or start a secondary campaign. We're not sure as to what we're going to do yet, so I do not have any experience with the game system. That being said, I am an avid gamer in terms of playing Terrinoth-related games, or Terrinoth-themed games, if you will. I have played Runebound, Rune Age, Descent 2nd Edition, as well as Legacy of Dragonholt. I think the only thing that's currently out that I haven't touched is Rune Wars, a miniatures game, because just not that much of a miniatures gamer. And with all this content that's out there in the Terrinoth universe, Fantasy Flight has finally gone ahead, put all of it into one book, which we have right here, The Realms of Terrinoth. And I want to review this book in terms of the lore and what value it can bring to a board gamer or even a miniatures gamer, someone that's just interested in Terrinoth, likes the setting, and would like to get a lot more information. And does Realms of Terrinoth succeed at giving you all of that information in one place? Or is this something that you should just try to, track down some of the older manuals that are out there for games that have been discontinued, like Rune Age, and still piece together all the information yourself? Or buy the book like I decided to do. And with that being said, grab your drink, grab your book, and let's review Realms of Terrinoth. Now we're going to talk about the first part of Realms of Terrinoth, which is Chapter 1, The Tales of Darkness. Now, the Tales of Darkness details the history of the land of Terrinoth and the peoples within. And I must say it was probably my favorite aspect of the book. You learn a lot more about the dragons, the Earthrights, and their history, how they related to the Latari elves, as well as some background on what the Infernal is. And for those people that have played a significant amount of Runebound, whether it be 2nd edition, 3rd edition, as well as Descent, you do get a really nice taste of what the 1st, 2nd, and the 3rd Darkness is. And that's one aspect of the universe that I thought wasn't very well fleshed out. You got, some nice background on it. Runebound really delves into the details about, Timoran Locander and his history, creating his orb, the shattering of the orb, and the stars of Timoran, and then them becoming the Runebound shards. But I thought there was just some aspect missing. You got the information you needed to play the game, build up the background, but I always wanted a little bit more, and that's what you're going to get in the first part of this book. I also found it incredibly fascinating just to learn more about Timoran's story, how his uncle was actually the one that founded the Yulan, the fact that, Timoran left the Rue Steppes, ended up in Lorimor, learning a lot more about Lorimor as well in terms of its history was very cool, because you get some ideas about that area when you're playing the other games, but they don't really talk too much about it. And then all the histories about, King Dakan, the Dakan Lords, I thought that was great as well. The one thing that I would maybe make it a little bit more negative about the first chapter of the book is that it really focuses only on the history of Terrinoth itself. So you're going to learn a lot about Lorimor, the Toralbas, the islands, Terrinoth, the Latari elves, the dwarves. You get tons of information on them when it comes to areas that aren't as well explored in some of the games as of yet. I would say things like Al-Kalim, the desert area, and Zanaga, the jungle area. Those aren't prominently featured in the background information that is provided in the book in Realms of Terrinoth. Now you will get some more information on those lands in chapter 3, and we'll talk about it then, but I would have liked to have a little bit more of the overall history of the world. But what you do get for someone that is a fan of any of the games set in this setting is quite good. It fleshes out everything that you would want to know about, well, maybe not everything, but most of what you want to know about Rune Wars, about the Yuthuk-Yulan, the Tari Elves, Dakin Lords, and it does a very good job of sort of setting the stage for when all of the games are played. Just from my own experience, it feels to me like all the games are being played roughly in and around the same time period, and the history that is presented in Tales of Darkness really gets you up to that point. And that's what you can expect from the first part of this book. We're going to cut right here just to give you guys some nice digestible chunks with regards to this review, and I will get into the second chapter of the book, so keep it right here. All right, so we're back, and this time we're back with chapter 2, Call to Adventure. Now, I must admit, chapter 2 is the chapter that I read the least amount of. The reason for that is Call to Adventure is the part of the book that really gets into the details of how to play the game, the new classes, the new items that you're going to be using in this fantasy campaign setting for the Genesys system. So there are a lot of rules and a lot of mechanics that primarily fill up chapter 2. That being said, that doesn't mean that I didn't read anything about it. There is some great background on all of the races. It will help flesh out a little bit more of their history, the personalities, and if you're playing a game like the 2nd edition, just give you a little bit more insight into perhaps why some of those heroes are acting the way that they do. I mean, there's a lot of great information about the different organizations that your adventurers may be a part of, and that's the part of the chapter that I really like. I love learning more about Kel, the disciples. Just give me a little bit more of an insight into Averick Albright, one of my favorite heroes from Descent 2nd edition. Now, chapter 2 isn't completely useless, like I just said. You do also get a lot of information about those different sort of warrior classes, which I thought is really cool. You learn a lot more about spirit speaking, the runic shards, someone that is using a runebound shard, how that actually works. You get a lot of information as to how magic works in Terrinoth, and I thought that was really cool. The chapter is very well put together, and anyone that has an interest in, let's say, just the classes of the heroes that you may have been playing in other games, as well as some more information about the races themselves, how they got to where they are, why they act the way they act, and if you're like me and you actually look into those heroes' backgrounds that you can find in all of the content that is put out there for those specific games. Like, for example, in all the expansions for the 2nd edition, you got that nice paper that does detail the backstories of those heroes. You're going to get a lot of really cool flavor in that part of the book, and I really did enjoy it. It's just probably the portion of the book for someone that is not going to be playing the Genesys system and sort of bought the book from more of a lore perspective and getting more information about Terrinoth itself. This is going to be the chapter you skip through the most. But it is very well put together. The art, once again, is fantastic. And the information that you get about the different spells, the different organizations, specifically about the elves and their different ways that they use magic is great. So it's a great chapter. I know it sounds like I'm repeating myself, but one that you're going to probably spend the least amount of time reading. But it does contain a lot of crucial information about Terrinoth and about those character classes, and even some of the units you might have been using in some of the games you played. I really like the section where the elves delve into more about the storm sorceresses, how they worked, what their philosophy is. And that plays directly into the experience I've had with Rune Age, which I think is very cool. So that really details what you're going to get in chapter 2. A lot of good information, but that is where the core gameplay mechanics lie with regards to the book. And we're now going to move on to chapter 3, so keep it right here. And we're back with the third and final chapter for Realms of Terrinoth. This chapter is called Lands of Magic. Now, the one thing I want to highlight in terms of differences between Lands of Magic and Tales of Darkness, the first chapter, is that Lands of Magic is largely based on the current sort of time period for Terrinoth. That time period where you may be playing Descent 2nd Edition, Legacy of Dragonholt, as well as Rune Wars, Rune Age. It really fleshes out the setting with regard to that specific time period. So what you're going to get in Lands of Magic is you get information on all of the different areas of Terrinoth, all the different lands that you can visit, and also what's going on in the lands. You'll get information on Terrinoth itself, the 13 baronies, some information as to what's going on with the Uthuk Yulan, what they're seeking, the dangers of the Rue Steppes and that area. You'll get a lot of great information about the Orcs of the Plains, Zanaga, Al-Khalim, two areas that aren't very well fleshed out earlier. You get a lot of information on them in the Lands of Magic section of the book. You also get some really cool information about Isenheim, if I'm pronouncing it right, the lands to the north, the Ice Lands, and the differences in magic in Isenheim compared to Terrinoth is quite interesting. You also find out a lot more about the gods of Zanaga, which I really actually enjoy, because you've got these incredible, powerful animals that are really godlike based on the descriptions that you get from the book. And when you read through all of the aspects of the realms of Terrinoth, specifically when you're looking at the Earthright, the dragons, the godlike creatures in Zanaga, the powers from Kel, there are still some big questions that aren't answered in this book, like what exactly is a god? Can a mortal or a powerful creature rise to godhood? And I like the implications of that because it really leaves a lot of stuff open in terms of storytelling. But I really wish there was a little bit more history in some of the sections of the book. You get a little flavor as to what's going on with Isenheim, Zanaga, and even the past of Al-Khalim, but we don't get a lot of the information as to, for example, in Al-Khalim, there were the Jinni that enslaved the humans. We don't know a lot about them, their history, and up to that point. All of that is not covered in Tales of Darkness. Tales of Darkness really relates to Terrinoth, the Land of Steel itself, and doesn't go into the backstories of those lands. That does give you a lot of freedom to create sort of whatever you want as a backstory, but it would be nice to see something a little bit more about those lands. Perhaps there's going to be some stuff coming in future installments. We're only 2 books into the Genesys RPG system. I fully expect Fantasy Flight to be releasing another campaign setting in the future, and perhaps we're going to see some elements that come out later on that flesh out the other realms of Terrinoth. Like maybe there's going to be your first pre-made adventure. Maybe it's set in Al-Khalim, Zanaga, or Isenheim. But I do like the Lands of Magic, and I think that anyone that's wondered what's going on in the world, who are some of these major players that we're potentially interacting with currently in our games, you're going to get a lot of that information in Lands of Magic, and it's really going to make the world feel a lot more lived in. It'll feel more alive when you're fighting against the Overlord, specifically in Descent. You get an idea as to just what other dangers are out there and why you need to stop this Overlord from rising to power. It also really fleshes out the effect that Margath and the dragons had during that Third Darkness, and where the people are at. The Third Darkness happened a while ago, but they're still recovering, and I think that's really cool, and they do a very good job of fleshing out all the baronies when you're going over the information on Terrinoth. So Chapter 1, you get all the history. Chapter 3, you get a lot of the current history, and it's very good. I do got to knock Chapter 3 just a little bit because you don't get enough history on those outlying lands in Chapter 1, and I was really hoping there would be more of that in Chapter 3, but you don't get that much on it. And the one thing I do want to highlight is we do get a story that's written throughout the book that just it's a thread that starts off in Chapter 1, goes all the way through Chapter 3. It's a story of a servant that was basically given, if I'm not mistaken, from my interpretation, one of the Stars are the shards of Timorin before it became a runebound shard and was sent to find more information on it in Terrinoth. His story continues throughout the book, and I was hoping there'd be some kind of resolution to it. There is not. I know that Fantasy Flight has been expanding sort of their lore around certain series. You see a lot of that currently with Arkham Horror. I'd love to see this character more fleshed out and maybe even a finale to his story, because it's one of the intriguing parts of the book, and it becomes largely a lot more fleshed out in Lands of Magic, because almost before you get into any one of the different lands, you sort of get a nice story preamble of this character's experience being a foreigner with all of these different lands. And I thought it was very well done. Just would have liked more of a finale to it, or just a hint that we're going to get a little bit more to the story, because it ends rather abruptly and we don't know what happens to him on his quest. But Chapter 1 and Chapter 3 are my favorite parts of the book. Lands of Magic, I think, is definitely a must-read for anyone that wants to understand more as to what's going on in the realms of Terrinoth, specifically if you're playing Descent, Rune Wars, Battle Lore. It highlights it very well, and is one of the, I'd say it's one of the most well-written parts of the book. I know I didn't highlight any creators or anything like that during the course of the review. There are a lot of names. I suggest you take a look at the front part of the book and see just how many people worked very hard to put this book together, because with regards to playtesting and creation, this is not something that one author can easily do by themselves. But I'm now done Lands of Magic. We're going to move on to my final thoughts on Realms of Terrinoth, and whether or not you, as maybe just a board gamer or someone that's seeking more lore with regards to Terrinoth, should pick up this book. So stay tuned, because we're coming up with the actual review. Now, I've gone over the 3 sections of the book, and I've given you some thoughts as to what I think about how the book is put together and the information inside with regards to each section. I just want to give you guys a nice summary on the book as a whole. Now, Realms of Terrinoth, is it something that you should buy? And personally, I think yes. If you're a fan of the setting, if you've played a lot of Descent, if you're playing Rune Wars and you want to get all that background information, the fact that the first chapter really just is pure setting and delves deep into the history of Terrinoth, the story of Timorin Locander, the shards, gives you a lot more information about Waquar and the events that even led to the elves joining the world. There's just a lot in there, and if you're a fantasy guy like I am, this is a book that I think you're going to enjoy, whether you decide to play the Genesys system or not. Now, one of the things that I do really like about Realms of Terrinoth is the setting itself is interesting, and there is enough information in here that you can potentially take this book and adapt it to another RPG system. Now, if you've never done that before, it might be rather challenging, especially if you need to create your own monsters, which largely you're probably going to have to do. I mean, there isn't really any Uthuk Yalan in any other campaign setting, so you'll have to kind of make them from scratch. Same thing with regards to Mariods and some of the other creatures that you will encounter in this setting. But the book is beautifully made. This is really the first Fantasy Flight like campaign setting book that I've seen, and I think they've done a great job of taking a universe, something that they tried to keep very generic for a long time, and then as they've kept releasing games, have slowly been giving us bit by bit, piece by piece, the story, the history of the world. They've made it more interesting. They've created a following to this universe, and it's now all in one place. You don't need to read just small snippets of the Battle Lore manual, the Rune Wars manual, and try to piece together some of the information yourself. It's all there. And I do think you're getting a solid value if you decide to just buy the game. Now, paying the MSRP for the book, about $50, is a little pricey if you're just trying to get the information about Terrinoth. You can also potentially buy just a PDF copy. And if you are someone that's a fan of lore and wants to learn more about the setting, you might be better off just purchasing the PDF copy of the book. But if you're also an RPG gamer, if you're looking to maybe get into an RPG and you have started out sort of with board games and Terrinoth has been maybe one of your preferred settings to game in, having this book and buying this book and trying out the Genesys system is something that I think you should really consider, because you know a lot already about the world. This is going to flesh out the world for you. It's going to make those board games that you have just a little bit better, a little bit more entertaining, and then also give you everything you need to create your first RPG game in a setting that you are very familiar with. And that takes away a lot of the pressure, specifically from the game master, as a lot of it's done for you. You're not starting from scratch. Now, final thoughts on the game in terms of a ranking. I'm going to give, the book. In terms of the book, I'm going to give it an 8 on 10. I think the book is fantastically produced in terms of the art, the information. I love the lore. I had a great time reading it. It did take me a while. The reading is a little bit dry. I mean, you are reading history. You're not going to get those swashbuckling adventure stories, but I still wanted to get through it. And the way it's put together, it is very easy to pick it up and put it down and digest the information, which I think is very important, specifically to any type of RPG book, because you want to be able to access the information quickly and easily without having to necessarily read it all at once, because, you know, anyone that's put together an RPG before, or put together a campaign, saying done the setup work, it can be a lot of work, and having the setting information and the history easily accessible in, you know, readable chunks, I thought was just fantastic. So this book's an 8 out of 10 for me. If you're a fan of Terrinoth, you should buy the book in some format. If you're an RPG gamer and you would love to set a game in Terrinoth, the book is absolutely a must buy. Once again, 8 on 10. We're gonna get out of here right now. Take a look up top. You should be seeing some video links popping up to our reviews and some other helpful videos based on the other games that we've reviewed in the world of Terrinoth, in the world of Runebound and Descent. You can also find links to our social media feeds below in the video description. And with that being said, from us here at Dice and Dragons, grab your drink, grab your book, and keep playing games.